I really thought that this was going to be a quiet news month, but I was wrong. Omega succeeded in both making everybody happy and angry at the same time. A CEO at a big watch brand is out, and a whole lot of YouTubers were doing collabs. Let's dive in. The Omega Speedmaster Reverse Panda. 2024, Omega released the fully white Speedy, which was a massive crowd pleaser. And this one too is a crowd pleaser. It's a reverse Panda, which to me is a fabulous addition to the Speedy lineup. It's not quite comparable to the two other sapphire crystal steel Speedies. Notably, there are three things that are different in the design that make a massive impact on how you experience this watch. It's got a fully glossy ceramic bezel instead of the usual aluminum insert. It has a double layer dial similar to the sandwich dials of Panerai, where there's a clear step down to the subdials. Dials have also received a varnished and lacquered treatment that is significantly more glossy than the two other Speedies. The watch is also a little bit thicker, likely because of the double layer dial. This is a watch that presents much more as a luxury chronograph compared to the Speedy. The Speedy's been around for a long time, but for me, this version shows the evolution that Omega is going through. My Speedy, which is the previous iteration, had the chunky bracelet. With the matte black dial, aluminum bezel, and the chunky bracelet, it was more casual in its appeal. It was never really a tool watch, but it had an aesthetic that had a lean towards the functional. With the new model, there were subtle changes, but the biggest one was the addition of the new bracelet. It was a notable upgrade in terms of feature set, but most importantly, the Nixon bracelet is closer to the sensibilities of Rolex's Jubilee bracelets. It's got a very strong taper, and overall, it made the new Speedy models a lot less functional and casual and pushed them more towards classier and more formal and sort of flashier space. With the addition of the ceramic bezel and the lacquered dials, this watch is now fully positioned as a luxury chronograph. If you had any doubt, this watch is much more closely aligned in terms of design choices with the elements that appeal to people that also like the Daytona from Rolex. Omega has moved this watch much more to the statement piece luxury buyer positioning. This is looking more and more like a deliberate strategy to me, because they did the same with the Aquaterra with its new bracelet and fully black dial, and they've also done it with the new Planet Ocean, which is no longer a functional dive watch. It's very much a luxury desk diver. So even though it's a Speedy, it's a very different Speedy from the other steel models. This is the Luxe Flash version. And then there's the price, which everybody had a meltdown about. I did my video on watch pricing a few weeks ago, and I made a couple of arguments. First, that overall watch prices hadn't really increased that much more than inflation for a lot of brands. Second, for a few brands, and Omega was one of them, they had actively chosen a strategy of going up. I even quoted then that my Speedmaster, which is 10 years old, has gone up in retail price 7% per year for 10 years in a row. This Speedy comes in at $10,400 versus $9,100 for the regular Sapphire Speedy. That's 14% more expensive. Hodinkee did a side-by-side of the new Speedy versus the Rolex Daytona, and they did some math that I otherwise would have done myself, but I'm going to be lazy and just steal their numbers. Long story short, over the last 5 years, the Daytona has gotten 25.19% more expensive. The Omega Speedmaster has gotten 28.17% more expensive. But more importantly, inflation in this period has been 24%. The net difference between inflation and the increase in the price of the Speedy over 5 years is 4%. That's not really that much. That's less than 1% per year over inflation. Over a 10-year period, the gap is bigger, 7% by my numbers. But like I said in my other video, a lot of the pain of these prices is not solely down to the price increases. It's down to the fact that a lot of people had a relative disposable income which has shrunk because of the cost of eggs and gasoline and utilities and housing. But 14%. People think it's mad to add 14% on top for this model. And again, I think we need some nuance. How does a watch brand get their ballpark retail price for their watches? Simple. You take the cost it takes to make the watch and you multiply by some set number. So Christopher Ward multiplies by 3x. So a $300 watch cost will retail for $900. Nobody knows exactly what Omega's multiple is, but it's definitely more than 3 times. The thing though is the cost of a ceramic bezel versus an aluminum bezel is quite significant. And we have to break it down. For an aluminum bezel, you have a simple machining press. You cut it, you stamp it, and you throw on the indices and the numerals. For ceramic, you have to throw it into a specialized press. It has to go through a kiln. You have more waste because you can't buff out a floor on ceramic. Either it's perfect or it's not, where on aluminum, it can be reworked or buffed over. The same applies to the varnished and lacquered dual layer dial. All I'm trying to say is that the stuff that goes in here is meaningfully more expensive than the regular Speedy dial. Add to that they've also had to make changes to the case. It's thicker, which means a new process and a new cost. All this added up means, yes, this watch costs more to produce. There's no discussion whatsoever. And if they just want to keep their usual multiple, it's going to have to cost more at retail. I would argue that you are getting more, and yes, it is at least justifiable that this watch should cost a little more than a regular Speedy. But here's where I think some people get it wrong, because it's not about the 14%. And I'm a big fan of Apple when it comes to their approach to tiering. I've talked about this before, but for their iPhones, their AirPods, almost all of their hardware, they have this logic of, here's the entry model, it costs X, and here's the next level model, and it costs this much more. The thing that Apple are really good at, usually at least, is that the pricing of those tiers makes sense where you feel, for the most part, that there's a meaningful improvement that justifies the price increase. You get a faster processor, you get a faster or better camera, you get a faster refresh rate. Rarely do you have a situation where there's a disconnect between the product improvements and the jump in price. And this is where I think Omega got it wrong. Because maybe 5x of the cost or 6x or whatever their multiple is equals a 40% higher MSRP. But to me, the problem is a ceramic bezel and a lacquered dial doesn't feel like it's meaningfully enough. Ceramic doesn't feel as exclusive as it did, and most people don't know how cool a varnished lacquered dial is. People intuitively understand that a two-tone gold Speedy should cost more than a steel Speedy. They don't intuitively think that a ceramic bezel should lead to a higher price. So it's not perceived as an upgrade, it's perceived as the same model, but a variant at a higher price. This is as if Apple had said, here's an iPhone for $1,500, and here's one that comes with a charger in the box, and that's $2,000. People would obviously be like, WTF, Apple? I mean, what the hell? You can't just charge $500 more for a charger. That's the problem. To Omega, they want to position this as the luxury upgrade. To everybody else, it's just a shiny alternative, and very few nerds feel it's reasonable to pay that much more for the shiny alternative. And this is a watch that's probably going to sell fine. But if they wanted people to see it as an upgrade, they would have had to have put even more features in to differentiate it. I know that half of the people watching this video are not subscribed to this channel. If you are enjoying this channel and you enjoy my content, then please click the subscribe button. I'm also trying to get to 200,000 subscribers because I'm insanely competitive and I just think it would be fun to get there. So if you want to support the channel, please click the subscribe button. Thanks a ton. The CEO of TAG Heuer quit/was fired the day before LVMH Watch Week. In a statement put out by LVMH, they said that he had decided to start a new chapter in his career. We thank him for his contribution and address wishes of success in his future projects. So in corporate speak, that means he was fired. This kind of exit this close to LVMH Watch Week is not an amicable break. They needed him out of the door fast. And how do I know? Because I work in HR. There are two options. Either he broke some rules or he had a massive falling out about the strategy and direction of the company. There are rumors floating around that it was probably the former, but I actually want to latch onto something else that I think is a little bit more interesting. Because a few weeks ago, he did an interview. He was asked in the interview as to whether or not 2026 would be easier than 2025. And his answer was, I don't care. At some point, we just have to find our own solutions. We have to inspire, we have to shock, we have to create excitement, whether we are talking about watches costing $2,000 or $100,000. We have been driven by the market too much. We need to be the drivers. When I read that, I heard the words of a man who understands the challenges of the industry. LVMH has seen a decline in luxury watch sales, just like almost all other brands. The reason for those are China, luxury slowdown, decreased consumer spending. LVMH as a whole is down 3% last year in revenue and 28% in profits. For the UK, the watch part of their business was down 36% over a 2-year period. That's bad. Now, we can't conclude through the UK that those numbers are indicative of the overall global decline. The UK specifically is in a more bad place than most countries at the moment. But I want to link his statement he made to something another senior executive at a major brand said to me a few months back. That person said to me, there has been no completely original watch collection in the last 25 years that has achieved an annual turnover of more than 200 million Swiss francs, apart from the Cartier 2007 Ballon Bleu. The point of that last statement was, there's too much risk associated with coming up with completely new original ideas, because odds are it won't be a massive commercial success. For these brands, they need volume, and risking it all on unproven designs has just proven to not be worth it. So what do? They reintroduce old dials, they update dials, they play it safe. And I think that's what Mr. Pin from Tag Heuer was talking about. An unwillingness to take chances in the industry, a risk aversion that is becoming stale and killing interest. I remember back in the late 80s, early 90s, jeans, denim was sold almost entirely in one way. It was men on horses or on motorbikes being manly and doing manly things. That was how you sold jeans. Then along came diesel, who had been struggling massively for all sorts of reasons, but they threw a Hail Mary, and they called a Swedish design studio called Paradiesel and said, help us out, we'll do whatever it takes. And they came up with the For Successful Living campaign. They had Stalin and Roosevelt at Yalta with hot ladies. They had gay sailors. And at the time, that was insane. And it worked. And they took a risk, and it saved diesel. I think Antoine was one of the guys that wanted to do more, to take more chances, to come up with something crazy, and maybe be crazy on marketing, maybe be crazy on product. And I think that's exactly what the industry needs. Risk-taking, ideas, not formulaic re-releases. Now, if he broke some rule internally, then he needs to go. But from an industry perspective, I think that he had a clear understanding of what was necessary to make a difference. Late last year, it was Brew, and now it's an already sold-out collaboration with American watchmaker RGM. I've not had hands-on with this watch. I think there were only like 25 made, and I have not had the opportunity to step on a plane and go to a showroom in Kansas, Ohio, or Cleveland. I'm going to say Cleveland. I do have some thoughts, though. And thought number one is, so far, Teddy has done collabs with Brew and RGM, both American brands. And I think and hope he sticks with it. Teddy is clearly building an integrated mini watch empire with his YouTube channel, his online store, his flagship stores, and now these collabs. It's turning into a one-stop shop kind of universe that has to impress you. I think for me, though, collabs have to be meaningful and have to make sense. There needs to be something about the collab that signals authenticity and integrity. And the American angle is the one I think serves Teddy well. I don't see a credible collaboration with Moser or Glashütte or even Grand Seiko. That would, in my mind, just be a money grab, which, although possibly successful, would be tonally off. Using his platform to showcase American brands, and especially with RGM, American craftsmanship, that's on brand, and he should keep doing that. Usually, I don't give a hoot about these kind of collabs. Too often, it's just a logo on a engraved case pack. This is a watch, though, that is original to Teddy. I find this more compelling than the Brew model, which was basically just a Brew metric with a different colorway. Setting a design aside purely for the collab just doesn't have that inherent lazy cash grab feel to it. So it's positive, it's really, really positive, and me likey. Adrian Barker has also done a collab with Christopher Ward. Unlike Teddy, this isn't a totally unique design, but to be fair, it's uniquer. It's the Lumiere model, but with several changes, including a bezel with a full 360 degrees worth of indices and numerals like a Unimatic or a Tudor FXD. They've replaced the dial numerals with plots. Overall, the watch comes across in pictures as very functional in its aesthetic. When I saw it, I instantly thought of the Unimatic design language, also some marathon divers. It's borderline minimalist and definitely not a desk diver. The Bark and Jack logo on the dial is only visible under UV light, and I think that's a good touch. And it also ensures that if you, for whatever reason, aren't really a big fan of Adrian, but still like the design, you could potentially still buy the watch anyway. If I have one complaint, it's €200, $500 more than the regular Christopher Ward Lumiere. Hi guys, Editing Mike here. I felt the need to get my opinion about the price of this watch just right. So I reached out to Christopher Ward and I asked them a very simple question. You say that you always price your watches at 3x the production cost. Does this also apply to the Bark and Jack model? The answer was yes. The reason this watch is more expensive than the regular Lumiere is the dial, so both the new plots, the Bark and Jack logo, and the texture of the dial adds cost. The included strap adds cost, and the included flashlight adds cost. Christopher Ward are still applying the same pricing logic as on every other model. I do, though, personally question if, just like the Omega Speedy, which I talked about a little bit before, whether everybody will feel that those three things add up to so much of an improvement that it feels like a reasonable extra. That's essentially up to each individual to decide. A lot of watches at LVMH Watch Week. I'm not a fan of the bracelet of the new upsized Carrera glassbox, but the watch itself is quite pretty. The Seafarer model is interesting, but in essence, it's a dial update, albeit one with some history. Zenith released a black ceramic skeletonized Defy with gold dial accents. I'm usually a big fan of Zenith's skeletonized dials. They are one of the brands that do have an understanding of being able to balance legibility and skeletonization. The A6343, which technically is in the Defy line, but to me is in the Zenith retro lineup. They've got, Hublot watches, mainstream watches, and their retro watches. That's how I categorize them. It's really an interesting release. It's going to be very much a niche taste, but if you're looking for a sports watch that isn't your standard Aquaterra Top Time B31 IWC Mark 20, this is a watch that's at least priced in that vicinity. I appreciate this watch because Zenith aren't afraid to stray from, the round case and center polished links mold. The leather bracelet is excellent, except for the lack of an easy adjust. They really need to update it. It would be a meaningful feature addition and would not hurt the retro look of the watch at all. With a little luck, I hope to have some of these Zenith models in for hands-on in the future. Louis Vuitton launched the Escalade with the Tiger's Eye dial, and I'm not going to talk about the watch itself, but with Denison last year in GPHG winning with their Tiger's Eye model, and with more and more companies creeping into their 1970s catalog, I'm guessing that where 2 years ago pink was the fashion forward thing for brands to do, and last year was about jump hours, this year Tiger's Eye might just be the trend that picks up steam and the thing that brands really get excited about. Short note on tariffs, because we have to. Patek are lowering their prices on average by 8% in the US. Color me shocked. But yes, they originally raised their prices because of the proposed 39% tariff imposed on all Swiss goods. But since that gold Rolex clock landed on the president's desk, the tariff was adjusted down to 15%, and Patek lowered their prices. Apparently, even Patek can feel people disappearing from stores when they had to shoulder 39% worth of tariffs built into the retail price. Richemont sold Baume and Mercier. This is noteworthy because it's been a while since a conglomerate offloaded a brand, but Baume makes sense. It tells me that Richemont wants to focus even more on the higher end, and Baume just didn't fit into that strategic mold. I also have a full video about how I think there are far too many watch brands out there. As for Baume, hopefully they can get a better life with their new owners instead of just languishing in obscurity the way they largely have under the Richemont umbrella. Last thing. It's the year of the horse, and that's a Chinese thing. And how do I know this? Well, because every year a lot of brands make Chinese-specific watches to commemorate the year of the dragon, the monkey, the rat, or in this year's case, the horse. Some are just like those collabs I talked about before, a little bit half-assed, where others have really had thought go into them. So here's my ranking. IWC, Portuguese, red dial, horse rotor. Lazy, last year it was a red dial and a dragon or something. JLC, a reverso with an enamel horse on the back. It's better, but still not exactly blowing me away. Tag Heuer Carrera chronograph. It's got a red date window and a red subdial. Harry Winston. Now that's a horse dial. It's got diamonds, it's got everything. I can't wear the thing, but it feels original. Longines, it's just red. Hublot, Spirit of Big Bang, frosted carbon, year of the horse. Also prize for longest name so far this year. This is the Richard meal for people that can't afford a Richard meal and have worse taste than people that buy Richard meals. This watch is super fast and furious in its design, and I expect the owner of this watch to have a tribal tattoo. But honestly, I kind of like it, and it's not derivative at all. Oris, red dial with a horse on it. Okay, they probably got this done together with IWC. Christian Dior. It's got a horse on the dial, but is it a Chinese horse? I don't think so. No. The fact is, the best horse watch of the year was Swatch. riding the clouds. I like this one a lot. It's good looking. It's not cheesily Chinese, but it still hits the colors and tones you want to be hitting. That's the one. Save your money by not buying any of the others. Get this watch. And there we have it. Everything worth knowing about the watch world this month. Share your thoughts in the comments. Which horse would you buy? Like, subscribe. Cheers.